so happy we're alive.
Officials, most of whom came of age during the war on drugs, they don't make such distinctions. To them, all drugs are bad, and all drug users are bad, except, of course, alcohol drinkers and tobacco smokers. And all drugs are equally dangerous and must be met with harsh criminal penalties. Now, some of them really believe that, but most know the truth. Unfortunately, they believe that if they speak the truth, they will be labeled as soft on drugs and defeated at the next election. So our basic challenge is to bridge the gap between public opinion and public policy. To do that, we must demonstrate that there exists a significant mainstream middle-class constituency who do not believe that marijuana smokers should be arrested and jailed. Simply stated, we must find ways to give a voice to the millions of Americans who support our position and to begin to organize this constituency into a significant political force. We must create a climate in which our natural constituency are free to speak out and join the political debate. We must make it acceptable in the mainstream to oppose marijuana prohibition and to call for alternatives to marijuana prohibition without fearing that people will damage their lives or their careers or their reputation. Now, it's understandable after 20 years of the war on drugs, just say no, ever-expanding drug testing, mandatory penalties, and increasing numbers of marijuana arrests, that people are paranoid. They're intimidated. They are afraid in large numbers to speak out. We understand that, but we must find ways to give them courage to change their position, because nonetheless, until we find a way to activate this constituency, to motivate them to speak out, to contact their elected officials, and to organize in their communities, significant legal reform simply will not be possible. We must convert this from a debate as a drug issue to a consumer issue. And we must change the stereotype of the marijuana smoker from that of some marginalized individual to that of a middle-class, hardworking, productive individual. And we must demonstrate that our culture is willing to exercise our political rights, that we are willing to take the effort to visit and write and call and contact our elected officials at all levels of government, and not just to let them know that we support reforming the marijuana laws, but that that's a high priority issue for us. A couple of specifics that I think we need to do. I think we need to significantly expand both our public educational efforts and our public advertising efforts. We cannot present the drug czar and our other adversaries to define either our issue or us. There is an enormous potential reservoir of support for our position among the American public, but not if our adversaries are successful in defining us as being dangerous or threatening to the middle-class American culture. For example, we know that fairness is an important issue to the American people. We know from private polling that a majority of the American people think it is unfair to send marijuana smokers to jail. So that's a theme that we need to stress and stress and stress. We need to encourage more positive role models to come out of the closet. Like the gay rights issue, so long as we remain in the closet and politically invisible, it simply is not possible for us to exercise the political muscle that our numbers would otherwise entitle us to. We must just put to rest the myth that marijuana smoking is a deviant activity engaged in only by those on the margins of society. In reality, we must make the point that marijuana smoking is incredibly common. It's the recreational drug of choice for millions of middle-class, hardworking Americans. In fact, the government surveys indicate that at least 72 million Americans have smoked marijuana at some point in their lives, about 19 or 20 million in the past year. Marijuana is the third most popular recreational drug of choice in America, exceeded only by alcohol and tobacco. A full 32% of the adult population acknowledged in polling that they have tried marijuana at some time in their lives. This involves a lot of successful business leaders, government leaders, including elected officials from both political parties. It's time that we reflect this reality in our state and federal legislation. Now, like most Americans, the vast majority of the millions of people who smoke marijuana are hardworking citizens who raise families, who contribute to their community. As the Marijuana Commission report said back in 1972, they are indistinguishable from their non-marijuana using peers, except for their use of marijuana. They are not part of the crime problem, and we simply must quit treating them like criminals. Our elected officials need to acknowledge that this constituency exists and stop legislating as if marijuana smokers are dangerous people who need to be locked up. Marijuana smokers are simply average Americans who happen to smoke marijuana. It is time we adopted a policy that makes the distinction between use and abuse, and which reflects the importance that most Americans place on limiting the power of government to reach into the areas of our private lives. Most of us agree that the government has absolutely no business knowing what books we read or the subject of our telephone conversations or how we conduct ourselves in the privacy of the bedroom. Similarly, whether one smokes marijuana or drinks alcohol to relax is simply not an appropriate area of concern for the government. By stubbornly defining all marijuana smoking as criminal, including that which involves the smoking of marijuana by adults in the privacy of their own homes, the government is wasting incredible law enforcement resources that should be reserved for violent crime. They are clogging our courts. They are filling costly and scarce jail and prison cells with nonviolent marijuana offenders. And most importantly, they are needlessly wrecking the lives and careers of up to 600,000 genuinely good people every year in this country. It is time that our elected officials recognize what millions of Americans already know, and that is that there is absolutely nothing wrong with the responsible use of marijuana by adults, and it should be of no interest or concern to the government. So while we are currently and admittedly a somewhat silent constituency right now, we are a sleeping giant that is just beginning to show signs of awakening. We are a constituency that has a right to participate actively and forcefully in the national debate over drug policy, and when our constituency in fact makes its presence known, our elected officials will in fact respond, but not until we let them know in the strongest possible terms that arresting and jailing marijuana smokers no longer wins votes or elections. In the end, let me simply say that this issue is only incidentally about marijuana. It is really about fairness and personal freedom. Thank you very much. It is now my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker today. Nadine Strasser is Professor of Law at New York Law School. She has written and lectured and practiced extensively in the areas of constitutional law, civil liberties, and international human rights. In 1991, she was elected president of the American Civil Liberties Union, the first woman to head the nation's largest and oldest civil liberties organization. The National Law Journal has twice named Strasser one of the 100 most influential lawyers in America. And you're going to hear about 3 or 4 of these. She's been on every list, I think, that's been made in the last 2 decades. In 1996, Working Women magazine listed her among the 350 women who changed the world between 1976 and 1996. In 1997, Upside magazine included Ms. Strasser in the Elite 100 executives leading the digital revolution. In 1998, Vanity Fair magazine included Ms. Strasser in America's 200 most influential women. In 1999, Ladies Home Journal included Ms. Strasser in the 100 most important women in America. Since becoming ACLU president, she has made more than 200 public presentations each